You've probably heard how the German army seemed unstoppable early in World War II. It's like they had some secret weapon, tanks speeding across Europe, forces striking before anyone could react. But it was never just luck or raw power. What made the German army so effective was a mix of bold strategies, new technology, fierce leadership, and a mindset completely focused on winning fast and hard.
This story begins long before the war itself, with the rise of a military culture obsessed with innovation after the brutal lessons of World War I. Germany had been crushed in 1918, barred from keeping many weapons under the Treaty of Versailles. That limitation forced German generals and engineers to get creative. They studied new tank designs, experimented with armored mobility, and planned for a future war they believed would be different.
One turning point came when generals like Heinz Guderian pushed the idea of mechanized warfare. Guderian wasn't your average officer. He was determined to change how armies fought. He argued tanks should not be slow-moving units stuck behind infantry lines, but fast, coordinated groups striking with surprise and precision. He read Soviet tank theory, had secret meetings with engineers, and pushed new training programs.
By the 1930s, Germany was secretly building up its army despite international restrictions. They developed panzer divisions, groups of tanks, motorized infantry, reconnaissance units, and artillery trained to move and fight together. This was unlike most armies stuck with slow, disorganized formations. German tanks communicated with. The success in Poland wasn't just about technology or speed. It was about daring decisions and flexible command. German officers on the ground made split-second calls to push or change the plan depending on what the enemy did. This flexibility kept the enemy off balance, never able to mount a solid defense. Next came the invasion of France in 1940, which shocked the entire world. Decades of trench warfare had taught armies to expect long battles. But Germany unleashed panzer columns through the Ardennes forest, an area considered nearly impossible for tanks. This surprise move bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line that France trusted to keep them safe.
Once German tanks burst into French territory, chaos erupted. The French and British forces were outmaneuvered and cut off. Entire divisions were surrounded and forced to surrender. The speed and coordination of the German army created a psychological effect. Panic and confusion spread through the defending armies. Paris fell in just weeks, and France was humiliated. But behind these victories was an even deeper layer: the German army's leadership and training.
This approach created an unpredictable force that, even when the top leadership didn't know exactly how the battle would unfold, the units could still act effectively. This decentralized command was revolutionary and often gave Germans the edge. Even the soldiers were drilled hard, not just on gun skills, but on working as a team. Infantrymen learned how to coordinate with tanks, artillery, and aircraft. Engineers quickly.
The German Luftwaffe, the Air Force, was also part of this system. Dive bombers like the Ju-87 Stuka weren't just powerful weapons. They were terror machines that struck fear into enemy troops and shattered morale. German planes could quickly support ground units, creating a constant pressure that defenders couldn't handle. Technology was also a huge part of the equation. Tanks like the Panzer III and Panzer IV were reliable workhorses, constantly improved throughout the war. Then came the legendary Tiger tank, a heavy beast equipped with thick armor and an 88mm gun capable of destroying most Allied tanks at long distances. Although expensive and produced in smaller numbers, Tigers struck fear.
But there were problems too. The German army's rapid advances stretched their supply lines thin. Trucks carrying fuel, ammunition, and food often struggled to keep up. This was painfully clear during Operation Barbarossa in 1941, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union. Here, the German army initially smashed forward with extraordinary speed, breaking deep into Soviet territory. The initial success was staggering. Cities like Kiev, Minsk, and Smolensk fell quickly, and millions of Soviet soldiers were captured. The blitzkrieg worked perfectly. In addition, Soviet resistance hardened. The Red Army adapted quickly, improved its tactics, and brought in massive reinforcements. The brutal Russian winter was another enemy German soldiers hadn't prepared for, causing equipment failures and freezing casualties. This campaign exposed limits in Germany's earlier success formula. No amount of speed could win a war they couldn't supply or prepare for. Even with these setbacks, the German army continued to innovate. Throughout the war, the German army was constantly adapting, making new plans, and fighting against increasing odds. However, the very qualities that made them effective early, speed, surprise, and decentralized command, became harder to use as they went on the defensive. The tide turned in battles like Stalingrad and Kursk, where sheer numbers, improved Soviet tactics, and brutal conditions ground down German forces. Still, even in retreat, German soldiers showed fierce determination and skill. Battles were hard fought, and the German army's legacy influenced global military doctrine for decades. Concepts like mechanized warfare and combined arms remain central.
To fully understand why the German army was so effective in World War II, you have to look beyond tanks and bullets. You need to see the whole system, the innovative leaders, the training, the technology, and the bold strategies that shook the foundations of warfare. Their early victories were not guaranteed. They were earned through relentless study, daring, and a vision of war very different from their enemies. But as the war dragged on, their weaknesses surfaced, showing how fragile such success can be when stretched too far.